Doctors and nurses, what have been your "why didn't you come in sooner" moments? I've been working pediatrics for about 15 years now. Nothing prepared me for what happened with Ben. His mom Alexis brought him in on a Tuesday afternoon. Real quiet lady, maybe mid-20s, looked exhausted like most single moms do. She sat down across from my desk and said the weirdest thing I'd ever heard from a parent. "Doctor, my son hasn't cried in 4 months. Not once." At first I thought she was bragging. Some parents come in acting like their tough kid is some kind of superhero. But Alexis looked worried, not proud. She explained how Ben used to cry normal kid stuff. Scraped knees, getting his feelings hurt, bedtime fights. Then one day it just stopped. Complete silence even when he got hurt. "He fell off his bike last week and scraped up his whole arm," she said. "Didn't make a sound, just got up and walked inside like nothing happened. I thought maybe he was being brave, but his face looked like he wanted to cry. Like he was trying to, but couldn't." That's when my doctor brain kicked in. I brought Ben into the exam room. Sweet kid with blonde hair and these big brown eyes that looked way too serious for a 7-year-old. I started with basic questions, making jokes, trying to get him comfortable. But when I looked closely at his eyes, something was off. They looked dry. Not just sleepy dry, but like desert dry. No natural moisture at all. I pulled out my little flashlight and took a closer look. His tear ducts looked scarred over, not from any accident I'd seen before. This looked chemical. "Ben," I said real gentle, "when's the last time you remember crying?" He thought about it, scrunching up his face. "Before Daddy started his visits." That made Alexis sit up straight. Her ex-husband Danny had just gotten supervised visitation rights after getting out of county jail for drug stuff. Been seeing Ben every other weekend for about 4 months. Exactly when the crying stopped. I kept asking questions, trying not to sound scary. Ben told me about his weekends with Dad, how they'd go to the park, get McDonald's, watch movies, normal stuff. But then he said something that made my stomach drop. "Daddy says crying is for babies and girls. Real men don't cry. When I got sad about leaving Mommy, he put special drops in my eyes to help me be strong." Special drops. I felt my chest get tight. "What kind of drops, buddy?" "Clear ones from a little bottle. They burned really bad at first, but Daddy said that meant they were working, making me tougher." I looked at Alexis. Her face had gone completely white. I excused myself and stepped outside to call my nurse. Asked her to get social services on the line immediately and prep for some tests. When I came back, I sat down and explained to both of them what I suspected. Someone had been putting chemicals in Ben's eyes, probably rubbing alcohol or something similar. It had scarred his tear ducts so badly they couldn't produce tears anymore. Alexis started shaking. "That's why he always came home quiet. Why he'd sit in his room for hours after visits. I thought he was just tired." The worst part was still coming. I ran some tests and found that the scarring was getting worse. The chemicals had been eating away at the tissue around his eyes. If this had gone on much longer, Ben could have started losing his vision permanently. Within 2 hours, I had CPS at the hospital. Police showed up an hour after that. They went straight to Danny's apartment and found a medicine cabinet full of rubbing alcohol, eye drops containers, and a notebook where he'd been writing down his parenting methods. Stuff about making boys tough and getting rid of weakness. The cop who arrested him told me later that Danny actually bragged about his system. Said he was fixing his son before society could make him soft. Complete psychopath. Alexis broke down in the hallway when she realized what had been happening right under her nose. Kept saying she should have known, should have asked more questions. But how could she have known? The guy was manipulating a 7-year-old into staying quiet about torture. Ben's in therapy now, both for his eyes and his head. The doctors think they can help his tear ducts heal with surgery, but it's gonna take time. The psychological stuff is harder to fix. Kid doesn't trust easily anymore. Danny got 5 years for child abuse. His visitation rights got terminated permanently. Ben testified in court through a video call, told the judge exactly what happened. Kid was braver than most adults I know.
What's one in a million thing you did that will never happen again? 1. One time I pointed at the sky one night and told my little brother, "Watch this," and a whole shooting star came and went. 2. I was playing beer pong years ago. Definitely past my limit on drinks. This really pretty girl shows up to the party and asks how to play beer pong. I started explaining the rules, and when I got to trick shot, she asked what they were. Never breaking eye contact, I threw my ball up, which hit the ceiling fan blades, which were going at full speed, and went straight into a cup. After laughing for 10 minutes, we all tried to recreate the hole-in-one. Never even slightly close. 3. I stuck my hand out the window to feel if it was still raining and a bird shat right on it. Never doing that again. 4. I don't know the actual stats, but I won one of those gold PS4 sets back when Taco Bell was doing their sweepstakes. 5. I was cutting vegetables in my kitchen and a fly was buzzing around my head, so I swung around with the knife in my hand and sliced the fly clean in half.
What childhood rule from your parents seemed ridiculous until you realized its genius as an adult? When I was growing up, my parents had this weird rule that my sister and I thought was absolutely ridiculous. No name calling. And I don't just mean the obvious stuff like stupid or idiot. I mean any negative descriptor aimed at a person. We couldn't say someone was annoying or selfish or even rude. My dad would immediately stop us and make us rephrase. It drove me insane, especially in middle school when Miranda would take my stuff without asking. And instead of being able to call her a thief or inconsiderate, I had to say, "When you take my things without asking, it makes me feel disrespected." Do you know how ridiculous that sounds coming from a 12-year-old? My friends' parents let them call each other whatever they wanted. I remember sleeping over at Becky's house and being shocked when she and her brother screamed, "You're such a jerk," at each other, while their mom just sighed and told them to keep it down. My parents would have had us sitting at the kitchen table for an hour-long discussion about feelings and respect. This rule followed us everywhere. Even at other people's houses, my dad would give us the look if we slipped up. I hated it with a burning passion. Fast forward to me at 24, living with my boyfriend Gerald. We'd been together for 2 years and things were getting serious. We talked about marriage, kids, the whole deal. But we fought. A lot. Normal couple stuff, bills, chores, scheduling, but our fights would spiral out of control so fast. One minute we'd be talking about whose turn it was to clean the bathroom, and the next we'd be bringing up things from 6 months ago. The worst part was that once Gerald called me something, lazy, selfish, whatever, I couldn't let it go. I'd fixate on it for days. He thinks I'm selfish. Is that really what he thinks of me? Does he really see me that way? It would eat at me until I brought it up again, starting the whole cycle over. One night we had this massive blowout. It started because I forgot to pick up something he needed for work. He was stressed, I was tired, and suddenly he was telling me I was irresponsible and never think about anyone but yourself. I lost it. I started screaming back, calling him controlling and impossible to please. We both said awful things. I drove to my parents' house at 11 p.m. crying so hard I could barely see the road. My mom let me in without a word and made tea while I sobbed at their kitchen table. When I finally calmed down enough to talk, I told them everything. All the awful things Gerald had said, all the awful things I'd said back. My dad sat there quietly for a long time. Then he asked me, "What do you actually like about Gerald?" The question caught me off guard. I started listing things. He's funny, thoughtful, supportive, ambitious. Dad nodded and said, "And what do you think Gerald likes about you?" I gave a similar list. My independence, my creativity, how I can make him laugh. Then Dad asked, "Do you think Gerald actually believes you're irresponsible and selfish?" I started to say yes, but then stopped. Did he? Or was he just angry in the moment? Dad said something I'll never forget. When you label someone, you stop seeing them and only see the label. That's why your mom and I never let you kids call each other names. Not because the words themselves are bad, but because once you put someone in a box, it's hard to let them out. It hit me like a truck. Every time Gerald called me selfish, I became nothing but selfish in his eyes. Every time I called him controlling, he became nothing but controlling in mine. We were creating these caricatures of each other that were getting harder and harder to see past. I went home the next morning and Gerald and I had the longest, most painful, most honest conversation of our relationship. We agreed to try something. No labels, no name calling, not even in the heat of the moment. When upset, we'd only talk about actions and how they made us feel. It was hard. So much harder than I expected. We both slipped up constantly, but something strange happened. Our fight stopped escalating. Without the labels, we could actually hear each other. When you forgot the thing I needed, I felt like my needs weren't important to you, is so much easier to respond to than, "You're selfish and irresponsible." 3 years later, Gerald and I are married. We still fight sometimes, but they're different now. Last month, Gerald and I had dinner with my parents. My dad asked how we were doing, and I told him about a disagreement Gerald and I had resolved earlier that week. Dad smiled and said, "You know, your mom and I have been married for 35 years and we've never once called each other a name." I looked at my mom in disbelief. "Never? Not even during your worst fights?" She shook her head. That's the thing about fights. They end, but words stick. Why would I want to put a label on the person I love most in the world?
What's something you learned embarrassingly late in life? 1. When I was a teenager, I posted a status online that said I was jacking off. I thought that meant you were just bored and wasting time until my older sister messaged me, horrified. 2. That a prostitute doesn't actually sell a piece of their body. Backstory: my mom and I were watching the scene from Titanic where Jack tells Rose that he painted a one-legged prostitute. I asked my mom what a prostitute was and she told me it's someone who sells their body for money. I could not fathom why someone would sell their leg for like $30. 3. Houston is not the name of the guy astronauts talk to. 4. I think I was in college when I realized that Mario and Luigi are plumbers. I thought they just went up and down these tubes just because that was the theme of the game. 5. I didn't know tortilla chips were made out of tortillas until I was 20 years old and saw the line cook at my job cut up a tortilla and throw it in the deep fryer. 6. I'm from Mississippi and until I was 18 I thought that everyone else in the country counted with their own state. For example, instead of 1 Mississippi 2 Mississippi, they would count 1 Nevada 2 Nevada or 1 Maryland 2 Maryland, etc. 7. When people say quote unquote, I thought they were saying quote unquote. 8. When I was really young, my sister told me she threw her guts up, so I was really afraid of vomiting my entire insides up for years. 9. I lived near the hospital for joint disease. When I was a kid I thought it was a special hospital for people who had 2 different diseases at the same time. 10. Things aren't supposed to start to get blurry at about 15 to 20 feet. Learned I needed glasses at like 26 from one of these threads. Yes people, you are supposed to be able to see individual leaves on trees. Hope someone else can be helped like I was. As a patient, what is the dumbest thing a doctor has ever recommended that you do? 1. I was 22 and had sudden, sharp pain low in my groin. It was so bad I couldn't stand up straight and could barely walk. I made an emergency appointment with my OB/GYN. After a very brief and cursory exam he told me it was a swollen ovary and it would go away in 2 or 3 months. I went home and told my then husband what the doctor said. He insisted I get a second opinion. I made many calls. Most doctors didn't do second opinions. I finally got one nurse who, in a bored voice, asked, "What are your symptoms?" I explained and she said she'd talk to the doctor and call me back. This was at 11 a.m. one workday. She called back and said he'd see me at 1. I went to his office straight from lunch. That doctor did an exam then turned to the nurse and said, "She's the one." I asked what he meant. He said that 1 in 1,000 women claiming they had an emergency actually did, and I was that one. Then he asked, "What did you have for lunch?" I responded, "A burger," and he frowned, then said, "You need surgery." I tried to tell him I needed to go back to the office and close out some projects first. He said, "Oh, you're not leaving here." They put me in a wheelchair and rolled me 200 feet across the parking lot to the hospital. I was given time to make 2 phone calls, one to my husband. I had to leave a message with the office admin. This is long before the days of cell phones, and one to my parents, since I couldn't reach my husband. Later, in the recovery room drive, Horowitz explained, I had an ovarian torsion on my right side. That happens when an ovaries, and in my case also the fallopian tube, bent and twisted around the tissue they're connected to. The torsion happened because there was a grapefruit-sized tumor on that ovary. It was benign, thankfully, but he said it was so close to bursting, and probably killing me, that he didn't dare let me go home. My husband returned to the first doctor's office and read him the riot act for almost killing my wife. 2. My daughter spilled a hot bowl of soup onto her legs on a Friday. She was in pain. Looked bad. I took her immediately to the ER. ER doc said it's like a mild sunburn, prescribed some Silvadine cream and Tylenol. Scolded me for suggesting it's serious. Tell her to stop crying, it can't hurt that bad. You sure, doc? She's overreacting. Later that night I call the ER again. Something's not right. Looks bad. It's as mild as it gets, they said. Let the Silvadine work. Don't worry. Monday morning I take her to her regular doc first thing because she's in pain. He flips out. Can't believe I did nothing. Wants to arrange an ambulance to the burn unit in the city 2.5 hours away. They flipped out when she got there. Over 2 weeks in the burn unit until they let her go home. If I didn't have the paper from the ER to prove our story, they would have put me in jail for child abuse. She turned out good in the end. We don't go to that local hospital anymore. 3. When I was 14 I had to leave school because my stomach was hurting really bad. Both my parents were working but I called my mom. She told me to go to the doctor's office. When the old guy who was our family doctor saw me and heard my complaint about the pain in my stomach, without even touching me or taking my temperature, he told me I was having my period and that is the cause of the pain. I was not having a period and I really did not know what to do, but I went home and lay down on the couch. My grandma came home from the store and took one look at me and took my temperature. It was really high. She heard the story of my trip to the doctor. Without further ado she put me in the car and drove me to the emergency ward at the local hospital. She went in with me and quite loudly demanded I be seen at once. From there it was emergency surgery to remove my appendix. The surgeon told my grandma that another hour or so my appendix would have burst. I refused to go to that doctor again even if he had been our doctor for donkey's years. Good thing I did not really need a doctor for a long while after that. 4. I had a knife stab in one side of my index finger and the tip was protruding through the other side. It was pulled out immediately and I knew it didn't feel right, so went to see a doctor. I told him it was hurting and I was having trouble bending it. He said it looks fine and to keep it clean. I reminded him that it does not feel right and it was stabbed through. He asked me very condescendingly if I wanted a band-aid with a smirk on his face. He applied one and said there you go, then he walked out. About an hour later I felt something sharp. The tendon had been sliced by the knife and snapped going down my finger and into my palm. It required an initial surgery to open my finger and hand to find, feed up to the other end and reattach it, then plenty of stitches. I then needed physio to make sure I kept fluid motion in my finger. A few months later I needed a follow-up surgery to remove scarring from where it was reattached so I could get better motion bending it. Then more stitches and more physio. Thank you for the fu-percenting band-aid and the condescending smile. 5. At 9 months pregnant my water broke at home. Called my OB, told to come in and see her. She examines me, says I'm 4-5 centimeters dilated and to go home and have lunch, take a nap and enjoy the afternoon. This was 4:30 p.m. Are you sure? Shouldn't I head to the hospital now? I feel I should go straight there? I asked. This being my second child I felt uneasy with the advice. But she's the expert. She got defensive and said, how dare you second guess me? I've delivered hundreds of babies. Are you a doctor? No? Then yes, I'm sure. Go home. I order you to go home. ! You've got lots of time. You're not even having steady contractions. She was still muttering when I left. Honestly, some of these patients, they have no clue. I have no car. I take the bus home. By the time I get home an hour later I'm in active labor. Contractions 2 minutes apart. Blinding pain. Panicked. Incredibly stressed and overwhelmed by the urgency for help. I got a ride to the hospital and almost delivered in the car. Had the baby within minutes of arriving shortly after 6 p.m. A huge and healthy 11-pound boy. Didn't even have time to take my jacket or shoes off. My pants had to be cut open by a nurse. The next time a doctor disregards your inner voice, listen to yourself and not them. You know your body best. Don't worry about upsetting a doctor. You do you. I trusted the experienced, respected, and highly regarded OB, and she is a good doctor, but everyone makes bad judgment calls from time to time. 6. When I was 17, I was taken by ambulance to the ER in the middle of the night. I had woken up screaming in indescribable agony and then fainted. My parents called 911. At the ER, I couldn't stand to do an x-ray because I would literally lose consciousness from the pain. What did the doctor say? You're constipated. He said I could go home, or stay there after taking laxatives and see if I felt better after a BM. I was furious, but I should note that prior to that, both the doctor and EMTs in the ambulance said you're just pregnant. I told the EMT, if this is pregnancy, no woman on earth would go through it. Plus, I wasn't sexually active. So, what was wrong? My ovary had exploded. So, the whole time I had been internally bleeding while this doctor has me waiting on taking a fucking shit. I can't remember the exact cause of this, as I was a teen and they explained it to my parents. All I remember the surgeon saying weeks later was one ovary doesn't preclude you from having kids. They didn't discover I needed emergency surgery until they finally did an internal ultrasound. Needless to say, they had given me nothing for pain. I'll never forget the look on the lady's face who was administering it, right before she ran out of the room in a panic. After an emergency surgery, I was fine, but they'll never forget the indescribable agony I was in when I awoke screaming. It was just out of this world. The surgery uncovered I also had extreme endometriosis, which they did the best to remove. It, thankfully, didn't impact my fertility.
What skill takes less than 10 hours to learn but pays off forever? 1. Learning where your water main shutoff valve is for your house. 2. Learning the shortcuts for software you use daily. I basically forced the juniors to start using shortcuts. As a software engineer, it always pays off in the end. Although this goes for everyone, designers in Photoshop, people using spreadsheets, if you use it daily, put in a bit of time to learn how to be efficient. 3. Learn how to swim. It can save your life. It shocks me how many people accidentally fall into water and die because they don't know how to swim. You can easily learn the basics and enough to keep yourself alive in 10 hours. 4. Learning to cook 5 cheap meals saves more money than any budget app ever will. 5. I'd say spending 10 hours learning how your computer works will pay off forever. So many people are unaware how their machines work. 6. Some basic civics. Understanding how your government actually works and is structured will save you a lot of frustration and anger. It might even save you from going down dangerous roads with your ideas. There are usually pretty good reasons why things work the way they do, even though things might seem slow and inefficient at times.